The bridge of the Galactic Council surveillance station hummed with its usual quiet energy as Junior Monitor Velktar examined the sector readings. The insectoid officer had been staring at the same empty space for 6 hours now, and his compound eyes were starting to hurt from the boredom. His forearms moved slowly across the holographic display as he cataloged another uneventful sector scan. Nothing ever happened in this part of the galaxy, and that was exactly how the Council liked it. The restricted zones were meant to stay quiet, and the dangerous species were meant to stay contained. Then every alarm on the bridge started screaming at once. Velktar jumped, so hard that he nearly fell out of his chair. His mandibles clicked rapidly as his hands flew across the console trying to figure out what had gone wrong. Red warnings were cascading down every screen, and the computer was making a sound he had never heard before in his 3 years of service. A distress beacon had just activated, and not just any beacon, but a Council emergency signal, the kind that was only supposed to be used when entire planets were in danger. Commander Zorath moved across the bridge with surprising speed for a crystalline being who stood nearly 8 feet tall. His internal light was pulsing with concern as he leaned over Velktar's station to examine the readings. The commander's voice resonated through his body like bells ringing in a cavern. "Where is that signal coming from?" Zorath asked. Velktar's translator chip converted his nervous chittering into standard galactic. "Sir, it's coming from the Sol system." "The human system? That makes no sense. The humans should not even possess Council beacon technology. We specifically excluded them from receiving any Council equipment until they proved they could be trusted." "I know, sir. But the computer is very clear. The beacon is definitely Council technology, and it is definitely transmitting from human space." Velktar pulled up more detailed readings, and his mandibles stopped clicking as he read the results. "Sir, the beacon is Quellan in origin. It appears to have been activated by Quellan pirates during a raid on one of the human colonies." Zorath's internal light flickered in a pattern that Velktar recognized as deep concern. "The Quellans attacked a human settlement? Are they insane? The beacon was likely seized during their assault and activated accidentally. You know how the Quellan raiders are. They steal everything and ask questions later. Council law requires we respond to all distress signals regardless of who activated them or why. Council law was written 300 years ago before we discovered Deathworlders," Zorath said quietly. His light was now pulsing in a rhythm that suggested he was thinking very hard about something unpleasant. "But you are correct. We must follow protocol, dispatch the nearest patrol fleet to investigate and provide assistance." What neither of them understood in that moment was that the Council beacon did not just send signals to Council monitoring stations. The Quellan pirates had modified it badly when they stole it, and now it was broadcasting on multiple frequencies including human emergency channels, and the humans had been waiting for something like this for a very long time. 3 star systems away, Captain Kyle Morrison was sitting in his ready room aboard the Earth Defense Force flagship USS Vengeance. He was drinking his 3rd cup of coffee and reviewing the absolutely boring patrol reports from the outer colonies when his communication console started flashing red. Morrison set down his cup carefully because red alerts were rare, and they usually meant someone was dying somewhere. He pulled up the message and read it once. Then he read it again. Then he read it a 3rd time because he could not believe what he was seeing. The message was short and simple. Quellan pirates had attacked the mining colony on Titan. They had killed 37 civilians. They had stolen everything valuable and burned the rest. Then they had accidentally activated a stolen Council distress beacon, which meant every ship in this sector now knew exactly what had happened. Morrison felt something cold and hard settle into his chest. His hand was completely steady as he reached for his communication panel. "Get me Lieutenant Commander Amy Zhang now." Amy arrived in less than 2 minutes. She was a small woman who barely reached Morrison's shoulder, but she had flown combat missions in 3 separate border conflicts, and nothing scared her anymore. She took one look at Morrison's face and knew that something very bad had just happened. "The Quellan pirates hit Titan," Morrison said without any introduction. 37 dead, all civilians. 14 of them were children. Amy's face went completely blank in the way it always did when she was processing something terrible. "Do we have authorization to respond?" "Not yet, but we will." Morrison was already pulling up star charts on his display. "Start calculating jump coordinates for the Quellan home system. I want every ship in the fleet ready to move within 6 hours. Sir, we don't have authorization to enter Galactic Council space. The Deathworld Accord specifically forbids us from crossing into Council territory without permission. If we do this, we could start a war. Morrison looked up at his first officer and his eyes were completely cold. They started the war when they killed our people, Amy. Now we are going to finish it. Amy stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once and left to carry out her orders. Morrison turned back to his console and opened a secure channel to Earth. It took 3 minutes for the encryption to connect him to Fleet Admiral Gordon Shaw. Shaw's face appeared on the screen. He was an old man now with gray hair and lines around his eyes, but those eyes were still sharp as broken glass. I just got the report from Titan Kyle. Tell me you are not about to do something stupid. I'm about to do something necessary, sir. The Quellans need to learn that humans are not prey. Shaw was quiet for a moment. Then he sighed. How many ships do you need? All of them, sir. Do you want to take the entire fleet into Council space? Kyle, that is 47 capital ships. That is every combat-capable vessel we have. If the Council decides to respond with force, we will be completely exposed. The Council is not going to respond with force, sir. They are going to watch. They are going to see what happens when someone attacks humans. And then they are going to decide very carefully whether they want to treat us like equals or like enemies. Shaw rubbed his face with both hands. You understand that if this goes wrong, you will start the first galactic war in 800 years. I understand, sir. But if we do nothing, then every pirate and raider in the galaxy will think humans are easy targets. We have to respond, and we have to respond hard enough that no one ever makes this mistake again. Another long silence. Then Shaw nodded. You have authorization, Captain. Take the fleet. Show them what happens when they hurt us. But Kyle, listen to me very carefully. You hit military targets only. No civilian casualties if you can possibly avoid them. We are not monsters, and I will not let this war turn us into monsters. Am I clear? Crystal clear, sir. Good. And Kyle, one more thing. Come home alive. I am too old to train another captain. The transmission ended. Morrison sat alone in his ready room for exactly 1 minute. Then he stood up and walked onto the bridge of his ship. Every officer turned to look at him, and he could see the questions in their eyes. All hands, this is the captain. As of 30 minutes ago, Quellan pirates attacked the civilian mining colony on Titan. They killed 37 of our people, including 14 children. Fleet Command has authorized a full military response. We are going to jump into Quellan space, and we are going to make sure they never forget what happens when you attack humans. All ships are to prepare for combat operations. We leave in 5 hours. The bridge was completely silent for 3 seconds. Then every officer was moving at once. Weapon systems were coming online. Shield generators were being charged. Navigation was calculating jump coordinates. The USS Vengeance and every ship in the Earth Defense Force fleet was preparing for war. Within 5 hours, the largest human fleet ever assembled was forming up at the edge of their home system. 47 warships, each one built in secret over the past 20 years. Each one designed with a single purpose to make sure that humanity would never be helpless again. The ships hung in space like dark metal sharks, and their weapons could turn entire planets into dust. The Galactic Council was about to learn a very important lesson. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world. It was a planet where everything was trying to kill you from the moment you were born. The gravity was too high. The weather was too violent. The diseases were too aggressive. And the dominant species had spent 10,000 years learning how to survive by becoming the most dangerous predators in their entire star system. Now those predators were coming for the Quellans, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Galactic Council response fleet arrived at the edge of the Sol system 3 days after the distress beacon had activated. Fleet Commander Toral was a distinguished Venturi with silver scales that marked him as a veteran of many peaceful operations. He had been serving the Council for 30 years and had never once fired a weapon in anger. The galaxy had been at peace for so long that most Council officers thought of their jobs as more like being police than being soldiers. Toral expected to find the aftermath of a pirate raid and perhaps some frightened humans who needed rescue and medical assistance. Instead, his sensors were showing him absolutely nothing. Toral's second officer was working the scanning station with increasing confusion. The Venturi commander leaned forward in his command chair and spoke in the calm tone that had served him well for 3 decades. Report, sir, I'm detecting no human ships in the area, no debris fields, no active distress signals. The beacon has been deactivated. Science Officer Lena was a small feline humanoid whose species were known for their exceptional sensor skills. Her ears were flat against her skull, which was never a good sign. There is evidence of weapons fire, but it is all at least 72 hours old. Whatever happened here is already over. Scan the third moon of the gas giant. That is where the beacon originated according to our records. Lena's hands moved across her console with practiced efficiency. Scanning now, sir. I am detecting significant structural damage to the mining colony. Multiple buildings have been destroyed by energy weapons. I am reading trace elements consistent with Quellan raider ships. She paused and her ears went even flatter. Sir, I am also detecting something else. There is a message buoy in orbit around the moon. It is human in origin and it is broadcasting on all council frequencies. Toral felt something cold settle into his stomach. In 30 years of service, he had learned to trust his instincts, and right now his instincts were screaming that something very bad had happened. Play the message. The main view screen flickered and then showed a human male in a dark military uniform. The human looked to be in his late 50s with gray hair and eyes that reminded Toral of deep space. Cold and empty and completely without mercy, the human's expression was carved from stone as he began to speak. This is Admiral Richard Hayes of the Earth Defense Force to the Galactic Council and all member species. This message is being sent as a formal notification under the terms of the Deathworld Accord. The Quellan sovereignty has attacked human civilians in violation of the Non-Aggression Pact, established 47 years ago. They killed 37 unarmed colonists, including 14 children under the age of 12. Toral's translator implant was struggling with the emotion in the human's voice. It kept trying different words and finally settled on something that translated roughly as controlled fury. The kind of anger that was far more dangerous than shouting or threats because it was completely focused and completely intentional. We have responded in accordance with our right to self-defense. The Quellan raiding fleet has been eliminated with no survivors. We are now en route to their homeworld to ensure they understand the consequences of their actions. Any council ships attempting to interfere will be considered hostile and will be treated accordingly. This is your only warning. Hayes out. The message ended and the view screen went dark. Toral sat in his command chair and felt the weight of history pressing down on him. He had just watched a human declare war on a council member species. Not a skirmish, not a police action. An actual war with the intent to attack a populated homeworld. Contact Council Command immediately, Toral said, and his voice sounded strange even to his own ears. Tell them the humans have gone to war. Tell them we need reinforcements and we need them now. Lena turned in her chair to look at him. Sir, should we pursue the human fleet and attempt to stop them? Toral looked at his science officer and wondered if she understood what she was asking. We have 5 patrol ships, Lena. 5. The humans just said they eliminated an entire Quellan raider fleet. Those raiders had at least 20 ships and they were all armed with military-grade weapons. We would not even make it into weapons range before the humans destroyed us. But sir, we cannot just let them attack a council homeworld. We are not letting them do anything. We simply do not have the power to stop them. Toral stood up from his chair and walked to the view screen. He stared at the empty space where the human message had been. Set course for the nearest council starbase. Maximum speed. We need to warn everyone what is coming. But in the council chambers on the capital world of Galatea Prime, the representatives were only just beginning to understand the magnitude of what had happened. High Chancellor Mevrin was an elderly amphibian whose species had led the council for 200 years. He was known for his wisdom and his patience and his ability to find peaceful solutions to any problem. Right now he was looking at the same message from Admiral Hayes that every council member had received, and he was feeling very old and very tired. Representatives, we face an unprecedented crisis, Mevrin said to the emergency session that had been called within hours of the message being received. The humans have violated the Deathworld Accord and entered council space with clear military intent. Council member Jexara, representing the Quellan sovereignty, stood on his delegation platform. The reptilian's crest was fully extended in a display of aggression. High Chancellor, my people acted within their rights. That colony was mining in disputed territory, and we sent ships to investigate. If there were casualties, they were accidental. Your people murdered children, came a voice from the human observation deck. Every head in the chamber turned to look at Ambassador Patricia Coleman. She was Earth's diplomatic representative, and she had served in that role for 15 years. The council had always found her to be pleasant and reasonable and easy to work with. She was a small woman who looked like somebody's grandmother with gray hair and soft features. The council had made the mistake of thinking that meant she was weak. Now she was standing at the railing of the observation deck and her face looked like it could shatter steel with a glance. Her voice was quiet, but it carried across the entire vast chamber with perfect clarity. "Ambassador Coleman, you do not have the floor," Mevrin said carefully. He was trying very hard to maintain proper protocol because protocol was the only thing standing between civilization and chaos. "I do not need the floor, Chancellor. I need every being in this chamber to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say." Patricia's hands were gripping the railing so hard her knuckles were white. "My government tried to work within your system. We followed your laws. We respected your borders. We accepted being quarantined to our own star system, like we were some kind of disease that needed to be contained. We did all of this because we wanted peace. The matter will be investigated through proper channels," Jexara hissed. "There are procedures for this kind of thing. The investigation is over. The verdict has been reached, and the sentence is being carried out as we speak." Patricia pulled out a small data pad and held it up for everyone to see. 20 minutes ago, the Earth Defense Force fleet arrived at Quellen Prime. You have 1 hour to evacuate all non-military personnel from the planet before the bombardment begins. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives were shouting in dozens of different languages. Security forces were moving toward the human observation deck. Mevrin was slamming his resonance rod against the podium trying to restore order, but no one was paying attention. Patricia just stood there watching them panic. Her voice cut through the noise like a knife. "Ambassador Coleman, you cannot threaten genocide before this council," Mevrin shouted over the chaos. "It is not genocide when you target military installations, Chancellor. And it is not a threat. It is a promise." Patricia looked directly at Jexara and her eyes were completely empty of anything resembling mercy. 1 hour. I suggest you start making calls." Security officers reached the observation deck and moved to escort Patricia from the chamber. She went without resistance, but as she was being led away, she called back over her shoulder. "You wanted to see what humans do when you hurt us, Representative Jexara. You are about to find out. I hope you are watching. I hope you all are watching, because this is the last time anyone gets to learn this lesson." The council chamber dissolved into shouting and accusations. Mevrin tried to restore order, but it was useless. Everyone was demanding action. Everyone was demanding answers. Everyone was demanding that someone do something to stop the humans before they actually attacked a populated world. But deep down, Mevrin knew the truth. No one was going to stop the humans. No one could stop the humans. The Deathworlders had been pushed too far, and now the galaxy was going to learn exactly why Council policy had always been to keep dangerous species isolated and contained. The problem was that isolation only worked if everyone respected it. The Quellens had broken that rule, and now everyone was going to pay the price for their mistake. Captain Kyle Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Vengeance watching Quellen Prime grow larger on the main view screen. The planet was beautiful in a way that made his chest hurt. Swirling blue oceans covered most of the surface, and emerald green forests spread across 3 major continents. The cities were massive and gleaming in the light of twin suns. It was a peaceful world that had known nothing but prosperity and safety for 3 full generations. Morrison could see orbital stations and pleasure cruisers and civilian transports moving in lazy patterns around the planet. That peace was about to end. "All ships reporting ready, Captain," Amy Jang announced from the tactical station. Her voice was steady, but Morrison could hear the tension underneath. "Battle formations established. Targeting solutions locked on all military installations. Weapon systems are hot and ready to fire on your command." "What is the status of the civilian evacuation?" Morrison asked without taking his eyes off the planet. "Quellen government has ordered all civilians to move to underground shelters. Council peacekeepers are attempting to evacuate high-priority targets, but there is not enough time, sir. They needed at least 6 hours and we only gave them 1. Amy paused and Morrison could feel her looking at him. "Sir, there will be collateral damage. There is no way to avoid it." Morrison's hands tightened on the armrests of his command chair until his knuckles went white. They should have thought about that before they attacked Titan. "Incoming transmission from Quellen Defense Command," the communications officer called out. "They are requesting parley, sir." "Put them through." The view screen shifted to show a Quellen military officer. His scales were deep crimson, which marked him as very high rank in their hierarchy. His crest was drooping in a way that Morrison's cultural database told him meant distress or fear. The Quellen's voice came through the translator with a desperate edge. "Human Captain, I am Supreme Commander Vexral of the Quellen Sovereignty Defense Fleet. Please, you must reconsider this action. Many civilians still remain in the target zones. Our people need more time to reach safety." "Then you should evacuate faster, Commander," Morrison replied, and his voice was completely flat. "Please, you must understand. The raiders who attacked your colony were criminals. They were renegades acting without government authorization. They have been disavowed by our leadership. They do not represent the Quellen people." "Disavowed is not good enough, Commander. Those raiders launched from your space. They used ships that were registered in your territory. They sold their stolen goods in your markets. They returned to your stations for repairs and resupply. That makes your government complicit in their actions." Vexral's crest drooped even further until it was nearly flat against his skull. "What do you want from us?" "We will pay reparations. We will surrender the surviving raiders for trial. We will open our trade routes to human ships. Anything to prevent this attack, please." Morrison leaned forward in his chair. "What I want, Commander, is for those 37 people to be alive again." "Can you do that for me?" Silence filled the communication channel. Vexral opened his mouth and then closed it again. There was nothing he could say because they both knew the answer. "That is what I thought." Morrison made a cutting motion with his hand, and the communications officer terminated the transmission. "Captain," Amy said quietly, and Morrison turned to look at his first officer. He could see doubt in her eyes, and that was good. He would be worried if his crew became comfortable with what they were about to do. "Are we really going to do this?" Morrison stood up from his chair and walked to the main view screen. He put one hand against the glass and stared at the planet below. Somewhere down there, people were running for their lives. Parents were grabbing their children and heading for shelters. Soldiers were reporting to duty stations knowing they were about to die. It was exactly what had happened on Titan, except on a much larger scale. "Amy, I have been in the service for 23 years. I have studied every war humanity has ever fought. I have read the history books and the tactical manuals and the after-action reports. And you know what I learned?" He turned to face his first officer. "I learned that predators do not stop when you show weakness. They escalate. They push harder. They take more and more until you finally push back hard enough to make them stop. But sir, this is not just pushing back. This is an orbital bombardment of a populated world. No, this is a surgical strike against military targets. We are not going to glass the planet, Amy. We are not going to kill civilians for revenge. We are going to destroy every military installation that could threaten human space. And then we are going to leave. And the galaxy is going to understand that humanity is not prey." Morrison walked back to his command chair and sat down. The galaxy has been at peace for so long that they have forgotten what war actually means. They see us as primitives from a dangerous world, barely civilized, barely worth acknowledging. They need to understand that we are not asking for a seat at their table. We are taking it, and anyone who tries to stop us will learn exactly why Earth is called a death world. "All ships are reporting ready, sir," the tactical officer announced. "Weapons charged. Shields at maximum. Awaiting your order." Morrison took a deep breath. He thought about the colonists on Titan. He thought about the 14 children who had died screaming. He thought about every human who had ever been told they were too dangerous to be trusted, too violent to join civilized society, too primitive to matter. Fire. The Earth Defense Force fleet opened fire with every weapon they had. Railguns accelerated tungsten rods to a significant percentage of light speed. The rods hit orbital defense platforms and turned them into clouds of expanding debris in microseconds. Missiles streaked through the atmosphere, leaving trails of fire behind them. Their plasma warheads detonated with the force of small nuclear weapons, but with far more precision. Energy beams carved through military complexes like surgical scalpels. Precise, controlled, utterly devastating. The Quellen defense fleet tried to respond, but they were designed for police actions against pirates and smugglers. They had never fought against a military force that had been built specifically for war. Human ships moved through the defensive fire with impossible grace. Their combat computers were making calculations faster than any organic mind could process. Their point defense systems were shooting down incoming fire with 98% accuracy. Their armor was shrugging off hits that would have crippled council ships. One Quellen destroyer managed to get a clean shot at the USS Vengeance. The plasma torpedo hit the shields and detonated with enough force to vaporize a small moon. The Vengeance barely slowed down. Morrison felt the ship shake slightly under his feet, and then the shields recharged and they were moving again. "Return fire," Morrison ordered. "Disable them. Do not destroy." A single railgun round hit the Quellan destroyer's engine section. The ship went dark and began drifting out of orbit. The crew would survive to be rescued later. That was more mercy than the Titan colonists had received. The bombardment continued for exactly 15 minutes. Shipyards became molten slag. Command centers became smoking craters. Weapons factories exploded in chains of secondary detonations. The orbital defense network was reduced to floating debris. Communication satellites were precisely targeted and eliminated. Supply depots were hit with kinetic strikes that left nothing but holes in the ground, and then the human fleet stopped firing. Morrison watched the tactical display as his ships reported their status. Every military target had been eliminated. Quellan military infrastructure had ceased to exist. The planet's ability to threaten anyone had been reduced to exactly 0. "Report on civilian casualties," Morrison ordered. Amy worked her console for a long moment and Morrison could see her shoulders tense as she read the numbers. "Sir, preliminary estimates show approximately 1,700 civilian deaths, most from secondary explosions and structural collapses. The targeting solutions were as precise as we could make them, but some buildings were closer to military installations than our intelligence indicated. 1,700 people." Morrison felt that number settle into his chest like a stone. They had not been raiders or soldiers or criminals. They had just been people who lived in the wrong place at the wrong time. People with families and jobs and dreams who would never go home again. "Compile a full casualty report. I want names if we can get them. Ages, occupations, everything." Morrison stood up from his chair. "Send this message to Quellan Prime and broadcast it on all frequencies. Humans do not seek war. We do not desire conquest. We do not want to harm innocent people, but we will not tolerate attacks on our civilians. Consider this a lesson in restraint. The next species that harms a human will not receive such mercy. Message ends." The communications officer sent the transmission and Morrison could see it being picked up by every ship and station in the system. The Quellan government would receive it. The council observers would receive it. Every species in the galaxy would know what had happened here today. "All ships prepare to withdraw. Set course for the jump point. We are going home." The human fleet began moving away from Quellan Prime in perfect formation. Behind them they left a world that would never forget what had happened. A world that had learned the hardest lesson in the Gal. The emergency council session convened 6 hours after the bombardment of Quellan Prime. The chamber that was normally a place of careful deliberation and ancient protocol now felt like a war room. Representatives were shouting over each other in dozens of different languages. Demands for action and justice and retribution were echoing off the walls. High Chancellor Mevrin stood at his podium slamming his resonance rod against the stone surface, but no one was paying attention anymore. "Order!" Mevrin shouted for the 10th time. I must have order in this chamber. But there was no order to be had. On the screens around the chamber, footage from Quellan Prime was playing on endless repeat. Burning military complexes, panicked civilians running through the streets, the human fleet hanging in orbit like a sword that had just fallen, and above it all the cold voice of Captain Morrison explaining exactly why this had happened and promising that it would happen again if anyone else made the same mistake. Ambassador Patricia Coleman sat in the human observation box with her hands folded in her lap. She had not said a single word since entering the chamber. She did not need to. The footage was speaking for her. Her face was calm as still water, but her eyes were watching every representative in the room. She was measuring them, judging them, deciding which ones understood what had just happened and which ones were still living in the peaceful dream that had ended on Quellan Prime. The humans must be sanctioned. Council member Jexara bellowed from his platform. His crest was fully extended in rage and his claws were scraping against the metal railing. They have committed an act of war against a council member species. They have violated every treaty and accord that governs civilized behavior. They must be punished. Your raiders committed the act of war, came a new voice from the entrance to the chamber. Every head turned to see Admiral Richard Hayes walking down the central aisle. The human military officer moved with the quiet confidence of a man who knew exactly how dangerous he was and did not care who else knew it. His dress uniform was perfect. His bearing was that of someone who had nothing to fear from anyone in this room. Security forces moved to intercept him, but Chancellor Mevrin raised one webbed hand. "Let him speak," Mevrin said quietly. The Chancellor had been in politics for 60 years, and he knew when to fight and when to listen. Right now, listening seemed like the wiser choice. Hayes stopped at the center of the chamber and turned slowly to address every representative. For the past 47 years, humanity has abided by the Deathworld Accord. We stayed in our star system. We limited our expansion. We accepted being treated like dangerous animals that needed to be caged. We followed every rule you imposed on us, no matter how unfair those rules seemed. And we did this because we wanted peace. You call what you did to Quellen Prime peace, Jexara demanded. No, I call it justice. Proportional response to an unprovoked attack on unarmed civilians. Hayes pulled out a small data device and held it up. Shall I show the Council the footage from Titan? The colonists begging for mercy. The children who were killed for sport. The raiders laughing as they burned families alive. Or would that be too uncomfortable for this chamber? The council chamber went completely silent. No one wanted to see that footage. No one wanted to admit that they had been content to let those deaths go unpunished because it was easier than dealing with angry humans. I thought so. Hayes continued walking slowly around the chamber floor. Humanity has been at peace for barely half a century. Before that, we spent 10,000 years at war. War with nature. War with each other. War with anything that threatened our survival. We know war in ways you cannot begin to imagine. We have refined it. We have perfected it. We have turned it into an art form written in blood and nuclear fire and the ashes of our enemies. Is that a threat, Admiral? Mevrin asked carefully. No, Chancellor, it is a statement of fact. A history lesson, if you will. Hayes stopped walking and looked directly at the elderly amphibian. But here is another fact for you. We do not want war. We want to trade. We want to learn. We want to join the galactic community as equals and partners. We are willing to follow Council law and respect Council authority. We will contribute to the greater peace, but we will not be victims. We will not be prey, and we will not allow any species, whether they are Council members or not, to harm our people without facing consequences. You demand equality while holding a weapon to our heads in another. Representative called out from somewhere in the upper galleries. No. We are holding a weapon to the heads of anyone who attacks us. There is a very important difference. Hayes activated his data device and a massive holographic display filled the center of the chamber. It showed star charts and fleet positions and weapons capabilities that made several representatives gasp in shock. This is the current disposition of Earth Defense Force assets. 47 capital ships, 300 fighters, 200 support vessels, enough firepower to reduce any planet in Council space to a lifeless rock within hours. We built this fleet in secret over the past 20 years using resources from our own system and technology we developed ourselves without any help from the Council. You violated the Deathworld Accord, Jexara hissed. The Accord specifically limits your military capabilities. The Accord limits our territorial expansion, not our right to self-defense. We stayed within our star system. We did not colonize restricted worlds. We did not threaten Council space. We followed the letter of your law while preparing for the day when someone would test our resolve. Hayes smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Congratulations, Representative Jexara. Your people volunteered to be that test. Mevrin felt the weight of 800 years of peace pressing down on his shoulders. The Galactic Council had maintained that peace through careful diplomacy and economic interdependence, and the shared understanding that war was simply too costly to consider. Wars destroyed economies. Wars killed billions. Wars set civilization back by centuries, and so the Council had created a system where war was not just unlikely but nearly impossible. Now a species from a death world had proven they could wage war efficiently and precisely and without mercy. They had shown that military force was still a viable tool of policy if you were willing to use it, and they had done it in a way that made every other species in the galaxy realize how helpless they actually were. What do you want, Admiral? Mavrin asked quietly. Full membership in the Galactic Council with all rights and privileges, the right to establish colonies on any habitable world, not already claimed by another species, free trade access to all Council markets and technology exchanges, and a formal apology from the Quellen sovereignty, along with reparations to the families of the deceased. That is extortion, Jexara protested. No, that is the price of peace. Hayes turned off his holographic display. You have 72 hours to decide, Chancellor. Accept our terms and the Earth Defense Force fleet returns to human space. We become partners and allies and equals. We work together to maintain the peace that has served the galaxy so well for so long. Reject our terms and we will assume the Council sees us as enemies to be contained rather than friends to be welcomed, and we will act accordingly. You would go to war with the entire Galactic Council. Mevrin could not keep the disbelief out of his voice. Hayes looked at the Chancellor with eyes that had seen too much combat and too much death. Chancellor, humanity has been at war with itself for most of our history. We have fought over resources and ideology and religion and territory. We have built weapons that could destroy our own planet 12 times over. We have stared into the abyss of extinction and pulled ourselves back at the last possible moment again and again and again. He paused and let that information settle into every mind in the chamber. You want to know if we would go to war with the entire council. The honest answer is no. We would prefer not to. War is expensive and destructive, and we have better things to do with our resources. But if forced to choose between submission and survival, we will choose survival every single time. Because that is what Deathworlders do, Chancellor. We survive, no matter what the cost. No matter what we have to do, we survive. Hayes turned and walked out of the chamber, leaving behind a room full of representatives who suddenly understood that the galaxy had changed forever. The age of peace maintained through mutual weakness was over. Now they had to decide whether to accept humanity as equals, or to try to destroy them before they became too powerful to stop. Patricia Coleman stood and smiled at the assembled council. It was not a friendly smile. I believe you have some discussing to do. I will be in my office when you are ready to talk terms. Oh, and Chancellor, one more thing. Those 72 hours started the moment Admiral Hayes entered this chamber. I suggest you use them wisely. She left without waiting for a response. The council chamber erupted into chaos again, but this time it was different. This time there was fear mixed with the anger. Because everyone in that room now understood what humans were capable of. And they were all wondering the same thing. If humans could do this to the Quellans, what could they do to us? 3 days later, Captain Kyle Morrison stood at attention in the Admiral's office aboard the Earth Defense Force Headquarters station. Fleet Admiral Gordon Shaw sat behind his desk reading the Council's response on his datapad. His face gave nothing away, but Morrison had served with the man long enough to recognize the slight relaxation in his shoulders. That meant good news. They accepted, Shaw finally said. All terms. Full council membership with voting rights, colonization rights on any unclaimed habitable world, free trade access to all council markets, technology exchange agreements. The Quellan sovereignty has issued a formal apology and agreed to pay reparations totaling 40 billion credits to be distributed among the families of the deceased. Morrison allowed himself a small smile. Then we won, sir. Did we, Kyle? Shaw set down the datapad and looked at his protege with tired eyes. You have been with me since the beginning. You know why we built this fleet. You know why we spent 20 years preparing for war while telling the galaxy we just wanted to be left alone. Because peace through strength is the only peace that lasts, sir. Exactly. But there is a cost to that strength that goes beyond credits and resources. Shaw stood and walked to the window that looked out over Earth. The blue marble hung in space below them, beautiful and fragile and completely deadly to most species in the galaxy. We have shown the galaxy what humans can do when we are provoked. We have proven we are not prey. We are not victims. We are not primitives to be dismissed or contained, but we have also shown them something else. What is that, sir? We have shown them that we are dangerous, Kyle. Not theoretically dangerous, not potentially dangerous, actually dangerous in a way they can see and measure and fear. Shaw turned back to face Morrison. Every species in the council will now see us as a threat. They will be polite. They will trade with us. They will follow the treaties. But they will never fully trust us. They will always wonder if we are one insult away from doing to them what we did to the Quellans. Morrison considered this for a long moment. Is that really so different from before, sir? They have been afraid of us since first contact. There is a difference between abstract fear and concrete knowledge, Kyle. Before they feared what we might do. Now they know exactly what we can do. That knowledge will shape every interaction and every negotiation and every diplomatic encounter for the next 100 years. Shaw sat back down, and suddenly he looked every one of his 68 years. We have changed the galaxy, son. We have reintroduced the concept of war to a civilization that had nearly forgotten such things existed. That is not something to celebrate even if it was necessary. So what are you saying, Admiral? That we should not have responded to the Titan massacre? No, we absolutely should have responded. We had to respond. If we had shown weakness, then every pirate and raider and opportunist in the galaxy would have seen humans as easy targets. We would have been dealing with attacks for the next 50 years. Shaw rubbed his face with both hands. I am saying that we have opened a door that cannot be closed. We have reminded the galaxy that violence is still an option, and now we have to live with the consequences of that reminder. A chime interrupted them. Shaw's aide appeared on the communication screen. Admiral Ambassador Coleman is here to see you. Send her in. Patricia Coleman entered, looking tired but satisfied. She accepted Shaw's offer of coffee and sat down with a grateful sigh. Well, gentlemen, we are officially full members of the Galactic Council. Our first colony ship departs for the Kepler system next month. Trade negotiations begin in 6 weeks. Technology exchanges are being scheduled. All in all, not a bad outcome for a species of Deathworlders. What was the final cost? Shaw asked quietly. Patricia's smile faded. The Quellan death toll was higher than initial reports suggested. 1,700 civilians died in the bombardment, most from secondary explosions and structural collapses, some from fires that spread beyond the military zones, a few from simple bad luck of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Morrison felt something cold and heavy settle in his stomach. The targeting solutions were supposed to minimize civilian casualties. They did, Kyle. Without our precision targeting, the death toll would have been 10 times higher. Maybe 20 times higher. But that does not bring those 1,700 people back to life. Patricia stared into her coffee cup. They were not raiders. They were not soldiers. They were shop owners and teachers and engineers and parents. They were just people who happened to live near military installations. The three of them sat in silence for a long moment. Morrison thought about the faces he would never see, the names he would never know, the families who would spend the rest of their lives wondering why their loved ones had to die for crimes they did not commit. There is something else, Patricia continued. The Council wants to establish a joint military command structure. They are calling it the Galactic Defense Initiative. The idea is that all member species contribute ships and personnel to create a unified force that can respond to threats against any Council world. They want access to our military technology, Morrison said flatly. They want to make sure we are not the only species with a modern combat fleet. I cannot say I blame them for that. Patricia looked at both officers. The question is, do we agree to participate? Shaw leaned back in his chair. If we refuse, we confirm every fear they have about us. We prove that we are building an empire, and that we see them as future enemies rather than potential allies. But if we agree, we give up our technological advantage, Morrison pointed out. We spent 20 years developing weapons and ships and tactics that no one else has. If we share that with the Council, we lose the edge that makes us safe. Do we really lose it, though? Patricia asked. Think about it. If we integrate our forces with Council fleets, then we are training alongside them, operating with them, learning their strengths and weaknesses, and they are learning to see us as partners rather than threats. Hard to go to war with someone when your children are serving on the same ships. Shaw nodded slowly. That is my thinking as well. We have proven we can fight. Now we need to prove we can cooperate. We need to show them we are not conquerors. We are just another species trying to make our way in the galaxy. All right then, Morrison said. We join the Galactic Defense Initiative. We share our technology. We train their people. We become part of the system instead of sitting outside it waiting for the next conflict. Patricia finished her coffee and stood. I will inform the Council of our decision. They will be relieved. Scared but relieved. She looked at both men with eyes that had seen too much politics and too much compromise. What we have done here will echo through history, gentlemen. Hundreds of years from now, people will still be debating whether we were right to respond with such force, whether the deterrence we established was worth the lives we took, whether peace built on fear of retaliation is really peace at all. What do you think, Ambassador? Shaw asked. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. I think we did what we had to do, Admiral. I think we saved human lives by showing the galaxy that attacking us has consequences. I think we secured a future for our species that would not have been possible through diplomacy alone. She paused. But I also think about those 1,700 Quellans every single day. I think about the fact that they died for crimes they did not commit. And I wonder if there was another way, a better way, a way that did not require so much blood. She left them with that thought hanging in the air. Morrison stood to leave, but Shaw called him back. Kyle, one more thing. The USS Vengeance is being reassigned to the Galactic Defense Initiative fleet. You will be operating alongside Council ships, coordinating with alien crews, representing humanity to species that still see us as barely civilized. I understand, sir. Do you? You are a warrior, Kyle. One of the best I have ever trained. But the war is over. Now comes the harder part, winning the peace. Building trust, proving that humans can be more than just efficient killers. Shaw looked at his captain with something like concern. Can you do that? Morrison thought about everything that had happened. The Titan colonists who had died, the Quellan civilians who had died, the line between justice and revenge, the difference between strength and cruelty, the question of whether fear was the same thing as respect. I can try, sir. That is all any of us can do, Shaw smiled. That is all I ask. Dismissed, Captain. Morrison left the Admiral's office and walked to the observation deck. He stood at the window looking out at Earth hanging in space below. Somewhere down there, children were being born. Families were having dinner. People were living their lives without knowing how close they had come to a war that could have destroyed everything. The galaxy had learned what humans could do in war. Now it was time to learn what they could achieve in peace. Whether a species born on a death world could build something better than what they had destroyed. Whether they could be defined by their compassion instead of their capacity for violence. Kyle Morrison did not know the answer to that question. But he knew that humanity would spend the next century finding out. And he knew that whatever happened next, the galaxy would be watching, judging, deciding whether to embrace the Deathworlders or to fear them forever. Far below on Earth, a monument was being constructed.